love old art books, and I really cherish my art library. I continue to add to it all the time, and I continue to use it pretty much on a daily basis. As an artist, as a full-time artist, I refer to it often, and it's just incredible how some of these older books just keep on giving. One of my all-time favorite artists is Andrew Loomis, and I've had his books ever since I was a kid, pretty much. And thankfully they've begun to reprint many of his books, although I still love the original ones from when I first discovered them in old bookstores before the internet. This particular book was originally called Successful Drawing, and a revised edition came out called Three-Dimensional Drawing. And he goes over perspective and spatial planning in such detail, but yet it's so clear and concise. He really must have been an amazing teacher, because not only are his drawings just incredible, but also the way he describes space and perspective and how to handle your art when you're drawing in just a flat surface. One of the most important things as an artist is to really understand depth and perspective. Many times some artists like to just go through and kind of fluff their way through it or try and make things up, and that's fine to a certain extent if you understand the fundamentals of perspective. And once you have those, you can really create whatever you want. But it's good to start out with the most simplest approach. With this particular book, you can pause it wherever you like, but he goes into many examples, starting from the simple to the more complex, and to the very complex, quite frankly. The nice thing about perspective is that we really use it all the time, and in much of the work that I do a lot of publishing work as well as animation. I'm always trying to find what is the most dynamic way to show a shot or set a scene, and I love to play with the perspective. And many times you may need to exaggerate it to get the shot you want, but you're still staying within the rules of perspective. And this has always been one of those books that I could always turn to kind of just set me straight whenever I'm starting to veer off, where I'm like, well, I don't know if I can really do that. If I'm going downhill, then I'm going to go uphill in the same shot. You know, what's the best way to break that down? And it's great when you pull out this old book and it just kind of floods back to you the first time you saw it. And I just remember as a kid, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes total sense, you know, how to work in perspective. You know, today with everything being digital, there's a lot of grids that are helpful, and all sorts of tools, whether or not you're doing paperless digital or CG. There's a lot of ways that you have the perspective that kind of helps you out, whether it's Google SketchUp or what have you. But it is still so important to be able to understand it quickly. Many times I may have to just do a very quick sketch just to give an idea of what the scene setup or the layout may look like, and that becomes very helpful when you understand perspective. You're able to communicate ideas quickly, and everybody gets it. And it's amazing with just a few lines how clearly you can set the scene in terms of, oh, that's where our camera is. Right now I'm doing something that has a downhill that goes into an uphill, then goes out into a bay, and I do it as a very quick thumbnail sketch, and I just take that sketch, I blow it up, and then obviously I flesh it out quite a bit. But that thumbnail sketch is pretty much the bones of the image. And you can see some of these little sketches could be considered thumbnails to a certain extent, and then he's showing you more of the technical side of how he got there. He does some wonderful examples of perspective in terms of when you're dealing with multiple characters or multiple elements in a set, in a scene. Well, there's one point over here, there's another point over there, and in many cases you're working with multi-point perspective, and you could get overwhelmed very quickly. Once you understand perspective, even multi-point perspective is something very attainable. Because Loomis here is also trying to demonstrate dimensionality, and typically he's working with light, a mid-tone, and a shadow tone. And just with those three tones alone, you're able to pull out quite a lot of volume. So that tonal approach of light, mid-tone, and shadow, now that volume is coupled with perspective. It really creates a very effective three-dimensional drawing when it's all achieved. As an artist that's been doing this professionally for over 25 years and drawing since I was a kid, there's many things that you take for granted because it's become a language that you've learned over the years, and this is another good way to kind of just reacquaint yourself to the fundamentals that you remembered when you were first starting in art and say, oh my goodness, I totally forgot that is a really good way to approach that particular scene or situation. Because sometimes, it's not that you forget, it's just that there's so much in your head over the years. You create your own language as an artist, I believe. Some people may say, oh, that's like a shortcut. Well, yeah, it might be. It's an idea that gets communicated through a certain series of lines or where I put shadow and light. And as you go further with your art, I know I've seen it in my own art, and I hope to see it for many decades to come. You continue to learn and you continue to kind of broaden your skill set in terms of understanding how to approach a subject, how to approach a scene, so that basically you're not thinking too much about the technicalities of how you're going to draw it. You're thinking more about, how do I visualize this? How do I make this shot look really good? How do I make this figure look correct? And obviously that includes a lot of life drawing and studying of drapery and clothing and weight and rhythm and distribution of weight. His strength of drawing is built on that perspective and putting that perspective to work in terms of, well, if he draws someone just standing there, they're going to look right in perspective because he's really studied it. And that's why you turn it all the way back to the sphere or the cube or the one-point perspective. So he takes you through all those steps in this book, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. I can't recommend it enough. I know there's also PDFs that are circulating out there, and that's fine too, but I always like to make sure that the artist, or maybe the estate of the artist, gets paid for their work. So it's nice that these books have begun to be reprinted. I don't think I have any of the new versions of the book, so I'm not sure exactly what the print quality is, but I would imagine they've got to be really good. Regardless, the material inside is priceless and worth every penny. If you were to take just one artist to study from, Loomis would probably be my guy. And if you look at the body of work that he created, and in terms of his books that he put out, they're a library all into themselves. They're one of the most complete art schools you can find. So I have some other Loomis books that I can share. I think it's always important to go as deep into the source material as possible in terms of, well, who did this artist learn from? And who did that artist learn from? So Loomis obviously learned from somebody as well, but regardless, he's really created a wonderful method of understanding for furthering your skills in terms of how to approach perspective, how to approach dimensionality and spatial drawing within a flat plane. Regardless if you're working digitally or in paper, you're still working on a flat surface, so it's up to the artist to create that depth in the medium that they're using, whether it's digital or on paper, and to have a better understanding of perspective will definitely be invaluable in that quest to just become a very, very solid dimensional artist and to create some very engaging, immersive scenes and settings. So I hope you enjoyed this quick look at another wonderful Andrew Loomis book. I hope to share some more whenever I can. Hopefully this will spark some creative juices and have you look at perspective, maybe with a new light. Most importantly, get this book and add it to your repertoire and put it in your knowledge skill set to build upon and your understanding of spatial drawing and dimensional drawing, utilizing perspective in all of your drawing. Whether it's just drawing a figure or a scene or a building or comics or whatever, what have you. It's really just a wonderful, wonderful addition to any artist's library for their future learning. Thank you again, and hope to see you soon.